All right, I want to bring in Nayyera, former White House senior director and former senior advisor at the State Department, and Kevin Barron, executive editor of Defense One. Nayyera, to you first. The Syrian government put out a tweet over the weekend, basically a video of Bashar al-Assad showing up to work, sort of this, business as usual. Is that the case? Are they not deterred by this, or are they just putting up a front?
Well, they have the backing of Russia, and Russia even declared yesterday that if any strikes continued in Syria, that the Western world would have to pay, that this would lead to chaos. It was a specific terminology coming out of Russia. So, no, this was not the deterrent that the White House necessarily is saying that it is. This is where the ambiguity that Hans mentioned comes in, because if you're not looking at regime change, but you are trying to deter chemical weapons use, don't wait a week. Don't signal to them that you're going to be doing that. And on top of that, don't attack positions where majority of the chemical weapons have already been removed. So not sure that Trump administration made anyone happy with this attack. Neither the humanitarian intervention folks who want to see the civil war end and want a stronger U.S. presence there and engagement. He didn't keep happy the America First people who want to see the United States retreating from the rest of the world and not trying to police what's happening in Syria.
Kevin, Russia and Iran spoke by phone yesterday and reaffirmed their alliance with Syria. Does that signal that Iran and Russia are not going to be spooked whatsoever by the U.S. response?
Oh, well, pretty much. I mean, I think, Russia did allow this to happen. Let's not forget that. The Russians did not engage their air defenses. They talked some bluster that they would immediately strike back, and it didn't happen. The Pentagon was able to put in 105 missiles without any fight back. So I think, I think it just showed that the time that it took for the administration to do the strikes was beneficial in that sense. It allowed Russia to kind of save face. It let the United States do this punitive strike against a chemical weapons convention, not against Assad, not regime change, not get overly involved. And that's the measured response that the Pentagon went for.
So clearly it's an overstatement for the president to say mission accomplished, but is he on the right track? Something is happening. Nayyera?
And there should be a combination here of military tactics and diplomacy. And we're not talking about multi-party talks. I'm talking about the type of diplomacy that happened in 2014, the infamous President Obama didn't strike Syria moment. However, the threat of U.S. strikes did lead U.S., Russia, and Syria to negotiate through the OPCW an elimination of 97% of the chemical weapons stockpile that Syria had at the time. So there is it should be a multi-pronged effort here, not a arbitrary tweeting and then following up with missile strikes. There needs to be a cohesive strategy that uses all the tools of the national security toolbox.
Kevin, New York Times writes, quote, if the West refuses to invest the resources needed to determine Syria's future, its efforts to penalize Mr. Assad will make life worse for average Syrians. What's your thought?
I think I'd agree with that. Look, I've been writing also that the United States just simply has not laid out its plan for how to get to Geneva. And I try to remind folks that the United States military mission on the counter-ISIS part, the part that owns half of the country, frankly, their military mission is to stay there, to stay with the Syrian democratic forces that they built up all the way through a Geneva peace process. But right now, tell me who's in charge of that. There's no Secretary of State. There's no Richard Holbrooke-type ambassador. Nobody from this country has owned this issue to take it to that final, to get it across the goal line. Maybe that'll change with Mike Pompeo coming to the State Department from CIA. They're more attuned to Syria than probably Rex Tillerson was. Maybe it'll change with John Bolton. But until then, yeah, you've got U.S. troops on the ground who are in a hold phase. Nikki Haley said that yesterday. And, the hold phase is where guys get killed. That's when you start getting some fight back from either ISIS, where the Americans are, or some sort of blending on that line when it comes to the Syrian civil war, where the United States has tried to stay out of.
All right, this situation is clearly complicated, and I appreciate you two joining.